Guangdong, the bustling economic heart of southern China, woke up this morning no longer to its busy streets and skyscrapers glowing with light, but to a vast, cold, and furious ocean of water. The skies seemed torn apart by thick, black clouds hanging low over the heads of its people, like a warning from an invisible force. Rain poured relentlessly, each drop like an icy needle piercing the skin, blending with the long howl of the wind to form a symphony of chaos and panic. The wail of warning sirens blared again and again, cutting through the dense rain, echoing across neighborhoods. Mixed within were screams of terror, choked sobs, and the hurried splashing of footsteps as floodwaters rose inch by inch. Many ran while glancing back, watching their rooftops swallowed by the muddy torrent, walls collapsing like broken toys. In just a few hours, more than 670,000 people were swept away or forced to abandon everything. There was no time to pack, no chance to choose. Young mothers clutched newborns to their chests, shielding them with torn raincoats. Elderly men and women hunched over, clinging to anyone still strong enough to guide them, stepping slowly through the surging waters. Children's cries blended with desperate shouts for missing loved ones. On social media, videos from the scene poured in. One clip, filmed from the third floor of a building, showed the entire street below gone, replaced by a vast sheet of water littered with wooden planks, metal roofs, and floating furniture. In another, raging currents lifted a car as if it were a toy, spinning it before swallowing it into a deadly whirlpool. These images were cold and merciless, as if nature itself were unleashing all its fury upon humanity. Fear spread faster than the water. In people's eyes, you could see despair gnawing away, see hands flailing in the flood like the last flowers drifting toward oblivion. Familiar streets had turned into dark, rain-soaked voids, occasionally pierced by the flicker of a flashlight from someone still searching for a way to survive. And in that gray, suffocating night, Guangdong entered a new chapter in its history, one written with sirens, the roar of water, and the echo of unanswered cries in an air thick with the smell of mud, rain, and an oncoming catastrophe. The nightmare truly began when the sky over Guangdong sank entirely into the color of ash, like a heavy blanket pressing down on all of southern China. The annual East Asian monsoon, already fierce in normal years, was now fueled by the heat of climate change, turning into a machine that dumped water without end. In just 24 hours, rainfall shattered decades-old records, transforming once gentle rivers into monstrous beasts roaring, breaking embankments, and sweeping away everything in their path. Water levels rose so fast that every safety gauge became meaningless. Markers along the river vanished beneath the torrents, their tops barely poking above the churning current. Loudspeakers blared from the authorities, "Evacuate immediately. Repeat, evacuate immediately." But those mechanical voices were muffled by the pounding rain and the relentless crash of water against concrete, warped into something distant and unreal, like a warning from another world. Then the rumors began to spread faster than the current. A massive upstream dam was on the verge of collapse. Text messages shot through chat groups, urgent phone calls were made, frantic knocks pounded on doors. In the rain-darkened night, groups of people fled their homes, wading waist-deep through rushing water. Someone shouted, "It's going to break. Run!" And that single sentence was enough to trigger a wave of panic that rolled from street to street. Familiar roads became mazes of raging water. Cars were abandoned, headlights casting ghostly glows over the muddy flood. Families braced themselves, fathers carrying children on their shoulders, one arm pulling along trembling grandparents, small hands gripping parents' legs with all their strength. Somewhere, a dog barked in despair, its chain pulled taut, but no one had the strength to turn back. In each heavy breath, people felt the change in the air, an invisible, icy pressure pressing down on their chests. It was the sense of something even worse drawing near. Then, through the storm, a long, low blast from the dam echoed, the final emergency signal. In that moment, Guangdong understood that time was no longer counted in hours or minutes, but in heartbeats, before the wall of water struck. The fateful moment came sooner than anyone imagined. In the pounding rain, the dam's deep, rumbling horn sounded, stretching like the roar of a beast about to strike. Then came a colossal sound, deep, heavy, and earth-shaking. The floodgates had opened. From afar, a white wall of water rose higher than buildings, crashing downstream with the force to crush anything in its way. Within seconds, streets already flooded turned into raging rivers. The muddy surge charged forward like a pack of starving predators, sweeping away buses, cars, even shipping containers weighing tens of tons as if they were weightless. Rooftops, once the last refuge, were ripped away, timbers and bricks shattering and clanging together in the current. Amid the chaos, rescue teams pushed into the flood on small inflatable boats. Every stroke of the oar was a battle against the ferocious current, every inch gained paid for with sweat and courage. They searched for hands reaching from windows, for figures clinging to leaning rooftops or utility poles. Every person pulled aboard was not just a life saved, but a fragile spark of hope in the thick, suffocating night air heavy with mud, rust, and the cold scent of death. But not everyone made it. In a narrow alley, a family of 3 stood on a roof, waving desperately for help. The rescue boat was closing in when a huge log hurtled toward them, slamming into the side and knocking it off course. Seconds later, the flood swept through, tearing away the roof and reducing the family to tiny specks in the endless water. The cries of neighbors still echoed, but in vain, the river had claimed them. Everywhere, sirens wailed, loudspeakers called the names of the missing, and the sobs of survivors merged with the roar of the water. Flashlights and boat lamps sliced through the rain, flickering like fragile shards of light struggling to tear apart the darkness engulfing the city. Yet even that light trembled against the boundless power of the flood. That night, Guangdong was no longer a land of prosperity, but a battlefield between fragile humanity and the primal fury of nature. And no matter how many were saved, this battle would leave wounds that would never heal in the memories of those who survived to tell it. When dawn finally came, its pale light did not bring warmth or hope, only revealed a scene of haunting devastation. Streets once alive were now muddy wastelands, littered with shattered wood, twisted metal roofs, furniture, and vehicles bent like scraps of wire. The stench of mud, garbage, and decaying animal carcasses was so overwhelming that many covered their faces with cloth to pass through. Houses that still stood were like silent ghosts, staring down at the receding waters that exposed the scars of the fury, mud stains high up on the walls, shattered windows, interiors stripped bare. In many places, bodies were found tangled in tree branches, caught on rooftops, or drifting into narrow alleys, people who hadn't escaped when the wall of water came. Over 670,000 were left homeless. Thousands of families crammed into makeshift shelters hastily set up in schools and community centers. Children huddled in damp blankets, eyes empty from shock, the elderly stared into nothingness, as if their souls had been swept away with the flood. Food, clean water, and medicine were as precious as gold, but worse was the uncertainty. No one knew when life would return to normal, or if normal would ever exist again. Guangdong's economy lay in ruins. Factories large and small sat buried in mud, machinery destroyed, warehouses emptied. Rice paddies, vegetable fields, and livestock farms, the lifeline for millions, were wiped out. The national and global supply chain was severed, triggering a domino effect across China and beyond. But heavier still were the invisible wounds. In the eyes of survivors, fear lingered long after the water receded. Every raindrop, every trickle of water made their hearts race, as if they were reliving the moment between life and death. Children woke screaming from nightmares, adults lay awake night after night. The flood had taken more than possessions, it had stolen their sense of safety, a thing they thought would last forever once a home was built. The Great Flood of 2025 will not only be recorded in meteorological history, but etched into the collective memory as a scar that will never fade. It is a cold reminder that among skyscrapers and modern technology, humans remain small creatures, utterly powerless before the wrath of nature. And when the earth rages, every line between rich and poor, powerful and ordinary, is erased, leaving all to face one undeniable truth: no one can bargain with death.